Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us on a Saturday morning. It's really inspiring to see so many people interested in the Quality of Life Index, which is what we're going to be presenting today, the Cyprus Quality of Life Index. We're really, really honored to have with us on our panel our esteemed panelists. We have, starting from the left, Mr. Demetris Hadjisofocli, who is the Managing Director of the Center for Social Innovation. We have Dr. Loizos Symeou, who is a Professor of Sociology of Education at the European University of Cyprus. We have Ms. Skevi Koukouma, who is in the Women's Progressive Movement POGO. She's the General Secretary. We have Dr. Constantinou, who is a Professor of Psychology at the University of Nicosia. And we also have Dr. Elena Hadjikakou, who is the Acting Director of the Cyprus Pedagogical Institute. My name is Katerina Theodoridou. I'm the Director of R&D and Project Management at the Center for Social Innovation, and we're the knowledge partners hosting this specific panel. So we are here today to talk about the Cyprus Quality of Life Index. I'm not sure if you know what Quality of Life Index is in general, so I'm just going to give you a very general overview before we pass the word on to our panelists. So when we talk about the Quality of Life Index, basically it's a comprehensive measure that quantifies various factors in order to explain and to provide information on what the quality of life and the well-being of a specific nation is. And it's derived by different measures based on different aspects of life. In terms of Cyprus, there is no, right now there's currently no Cyprus Quality of Life Index. So what the Center for Social Innovation has been doing in collaboration with Oxygono was to undertake this initiative last year in order to come up and develop basically the Cyprus Quality of Life Index. We started last year with a survey which was passed to 1,000 participants, and we've actually done this this year as well, another survey to 1,000 participants in order to understand and get the vibe from the people in Cyprus on what they feel it's their estimate, their assessment of their quality of life. Now, in general, there are different indices that exist in Europe. So, for example, the Happiness Index, the Better Life Index by OECD, and Eurostat, which provides a bit of information on different indices. So what we did was to do a very thorough literature review in order to understand which would be the main 14 aspects of life on which we would base this survey. So what we want to achieve based on this is to gradually form groups and with stakeholders and policymakers and understand what, through quantitative and qualitative data, what people think of this quality of life and how we can actually improve it at the policymaking level. So, okay. So I'm just going to show some brief findings from this year's survey in order to kickstart our discussion. So the 14 aspects of life that we focused our survey on are the ones that you can see here. These are common with other indices that exist in the European Union. So, and these are the 14 aspects that we figured out through literature review. So what we did was to focus specific questions on these 14 aspects and get the vibe from the people in Cyprus on how they feel about them. As I said, it's not the main objective today to present these findings. It's just a starting point so that we can lead our discussion. So one of the main questions was how important each of these aspects of life was for people in Cyprus. And you can see here we have a comparison. In blue, we have the findings from this year's survey, and in yellow, the findings from last year's survey. So we can see that people consider most of these aspects of life to be really, really important to them. And that was actually fortunate because it means that we were aligned with what the literature review says about the specific aspects of life that we need to include in the Quality of Life Index. Now, what was in a way worrisome, though maybe one might say also expected, were the findings in the question of how satisfied they are with each aspect, with each of these 14 aspects currently in Cyprus. So even though the findings for the importance were quite high, we can see here that the findings therefore the satisfaction that people have are rather low. So what we wanted to achieve today through this panel is to bring together our panelists that focus on 3 or 4 of these aspects of life, because we could not obviously have all 14, and discuss here how we can go forward with our index, our Cyprus Quality of Life Index, in order to get a better understand what the challenges is, and finally form the groups that will guide us through during the year while we do the rest of our research. Thank you. I will not do the PowerPoint anymore. Thanks. So. So we will start our discussion. Can you hear? Yeah? Okay, great. So we will start our discussion today, and the way that we're going to go about it is that we're going to be, I'm going to ask a question to each one of our panelists, and they will each have 3 minutes by the clock to answer the question, and then we're going to go into 2 rounds. If we don't go by time, then they're going to kick us out. The next panel is going to be quite dissatisfied. Even though it's still by the Center for Social Innovation, we still want to respect their time. So I'm going to start our discussion today with Dr. Elena Hadjikakou. First of all, a huge thank you to all of you for being with us today, taking the time of your schedule, and also meeting with us online this week in order to discuss these questions. And we really, really appreciate your feedback. So, Dr. Hadjikakou, our first question is about European directives. So basically, what European directives and educational policy framework do the Pedagogical Institute and the Ministry of Education follow so as to shape the educational framework in Cyprus, and how do these impact the quality of education?
First of all, I would like to thank you for the kind invitation to be here with you today. I will try to answer within the time frame we've been given. So if we are to ask the question that has been said, we could say that if we want to define the quality in education, it might be useful to examine it under the areas of policy, learners, teachers, content of education, outcomes, and of course the learning environment. Very often, the term well-being is related to quality in education, since it's an indicator of quality in education. According to the Council of Europe, well-being is the experience of health and happiness. It includes mental and physical health, physical and emotional safety, and the feeling of belonging, sense of purposes, achievements, and successes. You have to, excuse me, I have to read some of the text because I use quotations, so I do not memorize all those things. Right now, the European Commission put a great emphasis on well-being and has declared that well-being is a state in which pupils are able to develop their potential, learn, and play creatively. Moreover, and very recently, just during this month, the European Commission, in cooperation with NESET, which is the network of experts on the social dimension of education and training, has created a series of fact sheets. I will name some of these fact sheets. There is material on importance of social and emotional learning, building resilience in schools, supporting well-being and mental health through education. Moreover, according to OECD, you have already mentioned OECD in your references, for students' well-being, we have the psychological aspect, students' life satisfaction, sense of purpose, self-awareness, and absence of emotional problems. We have, of course, the physical aspect, which is the adoption of a healthy lifestyle in students' overall health. And we have the social aspect. It deals with students' relationships with family, peers, teachers. So someone might say that pupils who experience well-being can build and enjoy positive relationships with others and feel belonging to their school community. But what can improve students' well-being? According to OECD, we need supportive teachers, positive relationships, a disciplined learning environment, and of course, caring parents. Having said that, at the same time, we need to acknowledge the fact that despite the importance of basic skills, the European Union, there are certain challenges European countries face. More specifically, 1 in 5 15-year-olds do not possess sufficient competences in reading, mathematical, or science. Early school leavers from education and training represent around 10% of young people, and only 84.3 of 20 to 24-year-olds have completed upper secondary education. So socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds are still the strongest determinants of pupils' education outcomes. Children from poorer areas and families perform worse on average in schools compared to their more privileged schoolmates. In addition, there are warning signs that pupils' well-being is declining and cyberbullying is widespread. And of course, this has a very negative effects on pupils' development. So, concluding, we can say that educational systems need to be equitable and more inclusive. School education can play a crucial role in promoting inclusive, fairer, and more prosperous societies. Schools have an essential role to play in supporting teachers to make healthy choices and understand the effects of their choices. And of course, we need well-trained teachers who will have the opportunity for the continuous professional learning. And finally, the involvement of families and the cooperation between school and the parents is essential. Of course, the next question might be what the ministry is doing about all these facts, but I think this will be my answer to the next round of questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So just picking up on a lot of the indicators that you mentioned, I'd like to pass the word on to Dr. Symeou to give us his perspective as an education expert. What key measurements or indicators do you believe should be incorporated in the Cyprus Quality of Life Index to better reflect the impact of education on well-being?
Thank you, Dr. Theodoridou. I would also like to take the opportunity, as my colleague Dr. Hadjikakou here, to thank Cyprus Forum and the organizers for inviting me at this panel today. As a starting remark to what you are asking and the question that we have assigned, I admit that any such index as the one that we are discussing now, and many others, for example, that have been published elsewhere, the OECD one that you referred to, the Eurostat one, as well as other investigating similar notions like happiness and life qualities, in order to be able to capture what life and quality of life is, has its limitation. Because such concepts as the one that these indexes try to measure cannot holistically be measured due to their multidimensional and intersectional nature. Hence, we try to break down the concepts in components and aspects that might provide us insight as to how humans and citizens might live in real, daily life conditions, their personal lives. By breaking down the life and quality life indicators, though, at the same time, we have data on the separate indicators and measurements you include in this index that you have set up. And I now go to responding to the core of your question. Education seems to be one of the indicators that impacts and interconnects with the other indicators. Actually, it interconnects with all the other indicators, as well as in any other index that I have looked into may include. And this has not taken me by surprise that in both editions of your index, in the survey findings of the index, both last year and this year, education received the highest importance among all indicators, not in the second slide you presented, but mainly in as far as importance. And this relates to how educational research actually points out that education has immediate impact on how citizens perceive their well-being, and that at the same time education changes in methodology, philosophy, and practice influenced by the other indicators of the index. Therefore, I suggest here that the survey's participants could further be requested to reflect on education's importance and how education they receive, the education they receive across educational levels, starting from early child to higher education, have satisfied and impacted them on each of the other index indicators. For example, how has education impacted their economic prosperity, their access in the labor market, being socially responsible, digitally literate, gender sensitive, and so on. apart from the indicators that are presented in the index, I would also add measurements relating to the sense of belonging, being included. Dr. Hadjikakou mentioned inclusiveness, being valued by others around you, feeling independent and autonomous in learning, and acting upon daily life circumstances and conditions, and adapting to our rapidly changing roles. All these aspects of life, I believe, that constitute additional major indicators of a citizen's well-being, not only today, but also for tomorrow. Because education, as I had said, contributes majorly on how citizens develop and can cope in their daily lives, thus impacting their sense of satisfaction of their life. So hopefully I have responded to your question. Thank you.
You have. Thank you so much. And you're completely right that we also feel that education is the aspect that kind of interconnects with all the rest. And that's why we wanted to open today's forum with the questions on education, so as to kind of set the framework for the discussion. And because both of you have mentioned a lot of the well-being, the psychological factors, I wanted to pass the word on to Dr. Constantinou now in order to explain to us or kind of shed light on how can psychological well-being be effectively measured and integrated into the Cyprus Quality of Life Index, and what are the potential benefits of doing so for policymakers and society?
Quality of life in psychology has been a huge aspect in our measurements, whether it's psychometric or something that is not as official as psychometric assessments. So we've been measuring quality of life for many, many decades now, whether it comes to the individual level, like in people with diagnosed with disorders, or whether it's at a sociological level where you measure quality of life in a larger community. So we have been measuring that. There are measures out there that that can measure quality of life. Now, in psychology, of course, we're more interested in happiness. We're more interested in whether a person feels socialized enough in their community, whether they have access to things like education or health and stuff like that, but everyday life as well, whether their quality of life of their everyday life is good. For example, having a lot of traffic in a city lowers the quality of life of citizens. So in psychology, we're usually really, I don't know, we pick on details and we measure a lot of different indices when it comes to quality of life. And I think we mentioned already most of them. What was the second part of the question?
It was, what are the potential benefits of integrating, these measures for policymakers and society?
Well, it's very important. In an unofficial discussion that we were having a few days ago, for example, the happiness index that in Europe they issue that every year. At the beginning, a lot of people, they didn't pay a lot of attention to it, but citizens do understand quantities. Like when you tell them that this is like 20% or 70%, it actually helps the citizens understand what's going on, and the policymakers, so they can actually take actions. When you tell them that only 10% of people, they're satisfied with what's going on in the society regarding health, for example, that can affect policymakers. People can understand numbers in other ways. It may sound cold, but we do understand numbers better than more abstract notions. But yes, quality of life, I'm going to go a little bit back, and I know I'm coming to my 3 minutes. Quality of life is something that we have been measuring in psychology for quite a few decades. Not in the indices that you already showed, but more in the psychological, of course, aspects of everyday life and deeper psychological meanings.
Thank you so much. And I'd like now to shift going from education to the different social aspects and the different, the impact that society has, I'd like to also focus a bit on the gender aspect. And that's where I'm going to give the word to Ms. Koukouma. So from a gender perspective, what systemic changes or policy recommendations are essential to address existing disparities in areas such as income, employment opportunities, and access to healthcare and education? So we're kind of taking all these aspects in a way, picking on a couple of them, and just putting the gender aspect in order to understand where this is fitting into the rest.
So first of all, thank you that you have invited my organization to participate. And of course, congratulations for creating this quality of life index. I must admit that I didn't study in depth the index. I think we have to do it, all of us, especially from the equality side. And of course, it's a different aspect. I'm not sure if we can understand the issue of town or village. As an organization that we have local committees almost in every village. Or before, as a member of the parliament, I have the opportunity to visit towns, villages, refugee camps, and others. I had the chance to meet people and to realize how they think and what is a quality of life, what is happiness for them. And unfortunately, they don't have the same measure. Maybe a woman in a village is happy because she has a house, she has a husband, she has 2 children, and they have enough income. But this is not enough. For her, it doesn't count if she is respected, if she is treated as equal person, if she, a lot of these things that we don't count and we don't see in our everyday life. And maybe if you call her and ask her about her opinion, she will say that she's very happy, she's satisfied, she doesn't have many things. But it's our obligation to work on this issue and give, to help to open this discussion with them. I remember in a meeting where we were discussing the issue of violence. There were many women. Many of them asked many things, but I could see some women that probably they faced the issue of violence. They were just looking down, and they never spoke about what is happening to them or in their family. So there are many things that we could work. We have the issue, for example, the job. They are concentrated, women are concentrated in the low-income jobs. They are happy that they have a job. But they don't consider, for example, later when they will have a pension that is going to be very low, so low that today we count 40% gap in the pension amount. We have the issue of the infrastructure to support especially young families now. I found out that a woman that when she finds out that she's pregnant, she must reserve a seat in infantry because there are not many infantries, and there is a problem after 4 months where the woman had to go back to work. She will not be able to find, she doesn't have parents, grandparents to support them. And we continue to have this issue in all these aspects. And we must continue to work struggling for this, to have correct infrastructures, schools and universities where women now are more in a higher percentage than men. We are happy for that. But we count in the other side that in the political or in the leadership of every aspect, we will see mainly men because this is the situation. And I can continue to mention many other issues on this and how to change stereotypes. Of course, education is the main method that we can change society stereotypes and perceptions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Koukouma. And I'll focus on the jobs and the labor and the economic aspects that you mentioned before, which is a major concern. And of course, it was one of the highly rated aspects as important. And I'm going to pass the word on to Mr. Hadjisofocli from a practical perspective. So as an entrepreneur, what factors or conditions within the Cyprus business environment do you believe are critical for fostering economic growth and subsequently an improved Cyprus Quality of Life Index?
Okay, thank you, Katerina. Quality of life. How do we measure it? I think that's the thing in my mind. We live in a world that is systemic and interconnected, as many of my colleagues here mentioned. Is not different in the business world. In the business world, we are moving into a situation where we're talking about socially sensitive enterprises. And if we're going to do that, since we are interconnected, all the aspects that we are talking about in this particular index are relevant. Because everything that we do is based on kind of a triangle. One corner of the triangle is knowledge, the other one is culture, and the other one is infrastructure. When we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about education and legislation, healthcare, and all the aspects that make a human being happy. When we say happy, I think kind of makes its way through comfort. And I think that's where Ms. Koukouma was talking about in terms of depending where you are geographically, socially, and culturally, what's happiness and how you perceive happiness is different. It's not the same for everybody. So from a business perspective, if I put myself in the position of a business person, because I don't like only that definition, people that know me, they know that I have different sensitivities. I think we are looking for collaboration where nobody operates in a vacuum. So, for example, since we are making education to be the primary point of discussion, which is it is and it should be because it's critical, how education works and liaises with academia, for example, to create skills and quote-unquote build people that are going to fit into what we're talking about in terms of the business world. How does academia, education, and the businesses work together? The world moves very quickly. It's not the same that was 50 years ago that somebody went to school, little chair, little table, somebody telling them what it is anymore. People and the world and society moves very quickly. So we need to have this collaboration where all these three components in society work together to create an environment to facilitate a place, an infrastructure where human beings can be happy. And I think happiness, depending how each person perceives, is what kind of defines quality of life. In business is what we want. We want people that are happy, that have transferable skills, that they can take from a place to place depending how the economy works at a particular time. And I think if we do that, if we bring people that are happy and content and they know what they are doing and they enjoy what they are doing, the productivity is going to be there and the businesses are going to be happy. And then we have to talk about the aspect of artificial intelligence and how the world is going to change there and what are the skills that are important. And I know it's difficult to change that. And that's why, and I'm finishing, we need to have bigger windows of planning. We cannot plan anymore for next year. We need to get ahead of the ball, let's say, and plan for the next 30 years, because that's a cycle. It's a 30-year cycle. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hadjisofocli. And I know that I've asked you to put on the hat of the entrepreneur today, but I'll also like to mention that we're here and discussing the Cyprus Quality of Life Index because it was something that has been on your mind for the past 10 years. And we're very fortunate as the Center for Social Innovation to be running this under your guidance, because I know that this is something that is in your head, and it's something that you want to find out more about why people are happy and how can we make people happier based on this aspect. So thank you for that. And because you've turned it around again and focusing on education, which is actually the basis, I want to go into the more practical aspect of education. So I'd like to go to Dr. Symeou in order to let us know and discuss here how can educational research and innovation contribute to identifying and addressing systemic challenges that impact the quality of education and by extension the quality of life in Cyprus. So basically from the educational research perspective, what can we learn here?
Thank you. We had more variables here in the discussion, including quality of education. In educational research, we have extensive research as far as how we measure quality education and what comprises quality education. We have also enough research, as well as global, European, even Cyprus reports in hand on what systemic changes, the other term that you have introduced, Dr. Theodoridou, are needed for educational systems to better address the quality of the education provided. What we are actually lacking, not only here in Cyprus but also elsewhere, possibly a little bit more here compared to some of those that we would like to look alike, are provisions and mechanisms to rapidly make innovations. That's another term that you introduced. And innovative interventions in a way that would have impact on students' life and by extension on the life of citizens and the quality of education they receive, which, as we all agreed here, impacts the overall quality of life and well-being. In order to achieve this, what I just suggested, impact and mechanism to introduce such interventions, I believe that educational systems need to implement policies, measures, and procedures that are not based on a one-size-fits-all approach. Not only at the national, at the macro level, but also the micro, district, school level. There is still a persisting pattern in research of approaching educational change in distance and in inconsistency between the local community environments on the one hand and the educational system and the school environment and its workings on the other hand. Therefore, in any call for action as the one that is imposed by is shown, it's indicated by your question towards responding to this question, I suggest the adoption of strategies to establish equal opportunities for all and local communities. I assume that Ms. Koukouma will be pleased about this suggestion. And this needs to be done as part of an initiative for an inclusive framework. We go back to inclusion. It will only be successful when mainstream policies and funding are responsive to local specific needs. What is the problem is that most current policies in education lack an intersectional, systemic, and long-term perspective, which can only be addressed if national authorities follow a twin strategy of making mainstream services inclusive of all kinds, including social, educational, digital, and so on, and at the same time provide wherever needed targeted programs for those that need the most. In Cyprus, for example, even though that European reports point out that education is a key policy area with high number of interventions, compared, for example, to social and housing services, the number of measures reported do not reflect the ambition of the effect or the effectiveness of their effect, of their efforts. Part of this failure relates to not being accountable for the outcome. Our policies, in other words, need to set benchmarks to be reached, to be reported, monitored, and evaluated. And in order to address systematic change in responding to your concern, these measures need to be assigned, according to what I'm suggesting here, to a single local authority, agency, or institution that will be able to coordinate the actions of the various bodies and ministries involved, and not only the Ministry of Education. And such an agency or institution needs to establish a system of consultation with local communities who are currently absent from relevant decision-making actions and synergies. This agency needs to be allocated centrally with a specific state-funded budget, and after identifying the specific targets and subjects in the key policy areas of education, employment, housing, health, discrimination, social and protection against poverty, engage all relevant ministries in the process. To conclude, only intersectional educational measures could address multiple dimensions of what impacts the quality of life in Cyprus. And this is my statement.
Thank you so much, Dr. Symeou. And I'd like to keep it in the perspective of the practical aspects when it comes to education. And I'm going to go to Dr. Hadjikakou. So I'd like to ask you more about the students now. So how can the education system in Cyprus adapt to better prepare students for the evolving demands of the modern workforce? And how might this impact the quality of life for future generations?
The main work of our ministry is, of course, pupils and pupils' welfare and pupils' happiness and pupils' success on the cognitive aspect. It's important to say that our minister has already announced the priorities of the ministry, speaking about policies, as Mr. Symeou mentioned before. And the priorities set right now is the improvement of learning outcomes, is the satisfactory transmission of basic necessary knowledge, is the development of student skills, as Mr. Hadjisofocli mentioned earlier, which are not easily, let's say, measured or not easily developed, skills which deal with the social aspect and, of course, the emotional aspect of pupils besides the cognitive, let's say, direction. And great emphasis is given by our minister on the well-being in education. Well-being for pupils, of course, which is the main priority, but for teachers as well and for school leaders. Another aspect of the policy, as it has been highlighted, is the emphasis for evidence-based policy, something Mr. Symeou mentioned before. This is a very clear, let's say, direction. The question now is what measures are in place besides, let's say, the theoretical framework I mentioned before. Right now at the ministry, there are certain measures which take place as far as the content of education is concerned. Our minister has announced the need for updating and reconstructing of the curriculum, where the emphasis, of course, will be on the development of skills and competences for pupils, not just on knowledge. Of course, very recently, there has been a new change in the way the pupils are assessed, which falls under, again, the area of content. There is emphasis for other, let's say, areas that pupils need to develop besides the knowledge. And of course, in order to implement this measure, different teacher training activities are in place. Another pedagogical measure is the emphasis on differentiated instruction. We accept that not all pupils learn in the same way. So beginning from last year, there is specific emphasis on primary education in this area. Relevant material has been developed, and of course, teacher training is taking place. And of course, the prevention. I mentioned earlier about the high percentage of people, of young children who are illiterate. So there is certain measures to prevent this from happening. The other emphasis, the other measure which is taking place has to do with the way the school community works, as Mr. Symeou mentioned before. There is a recent cabinet decision which gives emphasis on school self-evaluation, that means that there are different measures that take place. And of course, there is an understanding for the continuous training of school leaders, because they're considered to be very important of the whole aspect. The other area I want to say a bit of things is about inclusiveness. I have already mentioned it in my previous position. It's important to say that there is new additional support for the teaching of Greek for pupils with a migrant background. More teaching hours are given to schools, more material has been developed, and of course there are different ways of training for teachers. I don't have enough time, so excuse me if I say these things very quickly. It has already been announced that there is a new open dialogue from our ministry with special education, which again is under the area of inclusiveness. And of course, there are different, let's say, measures the ministry is taking about violence. As we have seen the recent few days, there were different incidents. It's important to say that the ministry has a very clear, let's say, policy on school bullying. There is a very clear policy on anti-racism. And of course, all these policies need to be put into action from schools. That's why schools are supported in this way. There is emphasis on prevention of violence, so there is a new program which is running now for pre-primary school. And of course, there are different, let's say, measures which focus on teachers' capacity to face the situation, and different training activities are offered. I will just mention one program that we offer for, I don't know the English word is, for the teacher responsible for a classroom. That's something we call in Greek υπεύθυνος τμήματος. There is an online program running from last year in order to help these teachers to be more well, let's say, equipped how to use the issues of violence at schools. I move very quickly to another area. We have talked about the skills we need our pupils to have. I will mention about the promotion of digital transformation. This is a new project our ministry is running with funding that we have get from the European Commission. And of course, we have all the work which is being done about education for the environment and sustainable development, which comes in accordance, of course, with the policy of the UNESCO 2030 for the 17 goals for sustainable development. I move very quickly. I don't think I have enough time, right? No. For teachers' professional learning, this is a policy we put great emphasis on. I just wanted to make a small comment about the linkage between higher education and the workforce. Mr. Hadjisofocli mentioned before. There is a project running out from the ministry, realizing the need for upskilling and reskilling. So there is, let's say, a mapping of the way our graduates from universities follow in relevance with the workforce, with the work positions. And of course, this is, I finish, I promise. The measure our minister now has is synergies and dialogue. It was highlighted with all the previous speakers. There is an open dialogue with the stakeholders of the ministry for the promotion and implementation of all these measures. Thank you, and sorry if I took more time.
Thank you. No, I'm sorry for, not kind of allowing you to say everything that you would like to say, which is all so significant. It's just that time is pressing, and I'm looking at the moderator of the next panel, and he's like, okay, go on and on. Based on what you mentioned, and it's obvious that educational campaigns and strategies are substantial in this, I'd like to give the word to Ms. Koukouma in order to kind of share your opinion on how can public awareness and educational campaigns play a role in challenging gender stereotypes and promoting cultural shifts that contribute to a more equitable society, employment opportunities, and enhanced quality of life. So it all goes back again to the education and how we can morph that.
Obviously, public awareness and education campaigns are important because we need to break gender stereotypes and overturn the perceptions about the role of women, which for many, even today, should remain to the private life, childcare, and household. I will not go on discussing on and presenting what I prepare actually, because listening to the discussion here, it is very disappointing to listen to in every way about the strategies, about action plans, And mostly they are not really implemented. They are on papers. I will use again my experience in Parliament. They present very nice action plans, decisions. We even have our legislation is progressive, but they are not implemented in many issues, not only on the issue of the rights of women, the human rights generally. And this is very disappointing. And we should see how really we create the mentality to implement the action plans and strategies towards all the issues that we mentioned. And of course, about the rights, equal rights, equality and equity in our side. I come also from an organization that we have 70 years, more than 70 years history. That's why you are again disappointing, because we see that the steps are going at the same place. I don't know what is the exact word to say. But also I want to raise how can we change things. And I want to present a few issues that lately we had in Cyprus. So, for example, the issue with the Bishop of Larnaca and the court decision, how this affects the society and the mentalities, and especially towards women, to get the courage to speak out about what happened to them. And not only to speak out, because we have this campaign to support women to speak, but to have a result, not just to speak and expose themselves, but to have a result. And the decision of the Court of Larnaca is towards this was very, very important, and help people, women especially, to believe that they can fight, they can struggle of what happened to them, and they can continue. This will change really, in my opinion, and of how people conduct my organization, to say, because we were stand next to the woman that was accusing the bishop, and also the issue of in the sports, sexual violence in sports also is going to change things. And it will not only change things towards women to speak, but for men mainly, to avoid to do either sexual or other, because they will know that victims will speak, and they might be listened now. Before, they were not even listened. And another issue that I think that for many years, since 1974, we didn't give any attention, the role of the women in the reconstruction of the Cyprus economy, society after the war. They were hidden, men were at the front, and we know that the Cypriot woman was either refugee displaced, they were the mother, the sister, the wife of a killed or missing person. They were the ones that they were raped, and nobody spoke about this issue until lately. And we have to see exactly what was the role that played really very important role. The woman towards all these years, and especially the first years of after 1974, was the main, I don't know how to say, to keep the family, to create the home, to bring the memories from the occupied part to their new life. There are many issues that we can, and examples that we can bring, and we are ready as women organization to listen, because there are more, but working with women, we are near to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And because you've mentioned women and the struggles, it makes me wonder, and that's the question for Dr. Constantinou, about the resilience, because people need to have some skills in order to be able to cope. So my question is, could you share insights on the importance of promoting resilience and coping strategies at both the individual and societal level to enhance psychological well-being and the overall quality of life?
I'm going to concentrate on the youth, not that I don't value people who are older. That's because that's my job and work. A lot of people, in order to be resilient or to have quality of life, life satisfaction, they don't need big things usually. When you talk to them at an individual level, or when you do research and you ask at an individual level, or at my office when they come, and usually one of the first questions that I ask them, what will make your life better, or what will make you more resilient in this life? Usually we need small things, smaller than we all believe, to make us more satisfied with our life, more resilient in our life. For example, if you have students, they may tell you, we need more understanding teachers. Something sounds reasonable and small, but we are not usually all teachers understanding in all aspects of their lives. If you ask young people who work, they say they need more understanding bosses, who they understand what burnout is, that quality of life is important for them in order to be more resilient at their work, in order to be more resilient in their life. You may ask some people and they may say labeling is a big issue. I mean, when Demetris said for 10 years he had the same idea, I would go and tell him, he's obsessive, but that's labeling. I mean, when you talk to him, you understand that it's not obsession. It's actually an idea that he wanted to see into fruition and see it develop, okay? So we usually think really big when we talk about this kind of stuff, how to become resilient, how to be, to have a better quality of life. But most people, and we have, of course, a lot of common things and common themes, most people, they don't need a lot to have a better quality of life, or to be more resilient. Things that we can do really quickly in less than 1 minute is actually listen, let's say, to our students as faculty members. Listen to our students when we're teaching them at elementary school, our gymnasium, at lyceum. As bosses, listen to the people that work for us. As policymakers, look at what are the important things in the life of people. Changing, I'm going to go back to that, and of course you're going to see that that's something that makes me upset every day as well. Changing a little bit, for example, the traffic outside, it would change the quality of life, and people will be more resilient for other things in their lives. I mean, when you get home after 1 hour, an hour and a half in the car, being stressed, you're not going to be the best parent, okay? So some things can change actually really quickly if we had not just policies, overall policies as a society, but also little policies in the school that we teach, in the people that we interact with, asking a lot of youth what would be very important for them to make them more resilient or have a better quality of life. They tell you to be more, to have more equal opportunities in socialization, or equal opportunities in job placements. And of course in Cyprus we know that a lot of the times we don't have equal opportunities in job placements. And that's why we have a lot of dissatisfied youth. It's so many things that we could be talking for, like, we could teach a class on this for, like, I don't know, a year or so. We can do a bachelor's degree on this or a master's degree. So I'm going to stop here.
Thank you so much, and you're absolutely right. It's just, we're just touching on things right now.
Oh, sorry.
The last question goes to Mr. Hadjisofocli. I'm going to be asking you to put on a different hat now, not that of the entrepreneur, but that of a person who likes to follow digital transformation. So in terms of connectivity and digital transformation, what initiatives or investments can enhance the digital infrastructure and skills of the population, potentially raising the quality of life index through increased access to online resources and opportunities?
Thank you, Katerina. Before I answer the question, I'm going to do a summary. Action over words is one. A hug, I love you, and listening can solve a lot of problems. And if we have like a ministry of project management, to kind of put everything together, maybe we move to action. Because I was thinking, as I was listening to your idea, we have all these individual units that do a lot of work and put a lot of resources into doing things and all that. But I was wondering, how do they come together? How do they do things together? Who is managing that? So with that, and maybe Ministry of Project Management kind of, or maybe Ministry of Improving Quality of Life and Happiness, something like that.
So I'm guessing you would be the minister.
Yeah, why don't we have a Ministry of Happiness? I'm wondering. Digital transformation. I believe, very quickly, because I know we don't have time, digital should be free and accessible to everybody, because if we are talking about equality and equity and leveling the playing field, digital is what we had as the road system before. I mean, if you don't have a road to go somewhere, it's very difficult to do things. So the digital world should be available to everybody for free. I think it's an investment that every administration should be making. Some countries do it. And that will give access to people, regardless of where they are, geographically, intellectually, or what have you, to have access to information. Information is the key. If you have information access to information, I think you can do a lot of things, including learning, including making learning easier, moving from consuming data to actually processing data as human beings. And I think that's where the key is, and that's where the education thinking should move, in my mind, without being an expert in education. And it also provides the conduit for people to raise their concerns and go into issues like equality between men, women, and all these social aspects of life. So it should be free. It can be done. It's not as expensive as we think it is. And then if you couple that with the training on how to use data in the digital world, and we're talking about artificial intelligence and all these technologies that are coming up that are making our lives easier, that will make more time for people to focus on other things that may be a little bit more important, and that will be, I will call it soft stuff, which are not that soft. Again, caring for each other, loving each other, understanding each other, listening to each other. And I will close with that. I always say we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, because it's 2 times more difficult to listen than to speak. Okay? So let's listen to each other a little bit more. Let's figure out how we can support each other, and hopefully we're going to be able to put together the infrastructure that is going to bring this thing together. Because again, one of the obvious things here is that it's not easy to make everybody happy. It's not easy to improve everybody's quality of life, because each person has a different perspective. But I think we can make an improvement. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So I know that we're out of time, so I'm just going to wrap it up. We can take questions outside if you want, so that the next panel can come up. I just wanted to, you've kind of did the concluding remarks for us. No, it's thank you for that. Just to add on what Demetris said, today what we've done is that we started a discussion on the Cyprus Quality of Life Index. I wish we had more hours to go on and on about it. It's obvious that all these aspects that we've seen, they're interconnected. We start from education, and that's where the road can develop into developing synergies, training, open dialogue, and so many other keywords that you mentioned today, which is obvious that what we need is action. And what Ms. Koukouma said is that it's really sad to have all these things on the table and just remain in the drawers. So I just hope that with this Cyprus Quality of Life Index, it's something that we will pass on to the policymakers so that we can have a bit of an impact. I mean, I know that it's not going to change everything, but that's the starting point. And I welcome, of course, all of you to be part of it. And I thank you so much for today, for being here with us and sharing your insights. And thank you also for being with us today and listening to us.